Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive, and today's deep dive actually is going to be pretty interesting, I think. The piece of source material that we're going to dig into today comes from a podcast called the Inner Fire Podcast,
Okay.
and the specific episode that you've given us is called "Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable," which I think right away just the title itself kind of makes you go, what is that about?
Yeah. And when I saw that title, I was like, okay, yeah, I got to dig into this because I'm all about, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so what we want to do today is really dissect this idea of discomfort and how it's really not this, negative thing to be avoided, but like the source material suggests it's something that we should actually embrace.
Yeah, like the core of this whole thing seems to be about understanding discomfort as like a pathway, right?
Yeah.
Like a necessary step towards actually achieving those things that you really want.
Right.
You
It's
know?
about changing your perspective on challenges and realizing that the discomfort is actually a signpost.
Okay, so they jump right into it in the podcast. Right from the beginning, they say, the things you truly desire, those really big achievements, those things that you really want to do in your life, they're likely located just outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, that comfortable space that we all like to hang out in sometimes. And it kind of, paints this picture of comfort as a potential barrier, right? Like
Yeah.
it can be restrictive.
Yeah, you could be this kind of sneaky trap, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this idea of the comfort zone trap a little bit more. When we say comfort zone, what are we really talking about?
Well, I think we're talking about that space where everything feels safe and predictable, right?
Yeah, like your routines, the things you've already mastered.
Exactly. Those things you know how to do really well.
Yeah, where you're totally in control.
Right. And there's a certain allure to that.
There is. Like, it
Yeah.
feels good. It's nice and cozy.
Yeah. But the podcast makes this really interesting point that nothing truly grows in that space. Like you're not going to achieve anything groundbreaking or have these like major personal breakthroughs if you're always staying in that zone.
Right. It's almost like it becomes this kind of like a ceiling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like a self-imposed limitation.
Exactly. Like you feel protected, but you're actually preventing yourself from reaching your full potential.
Right. And then that leads to that feeling of being stuck in a rut,
Yeah.
just going through the motions but not really making any significant progress.
Yeah. And so naturally that leads us to thinking, okay, well, what about the opposite then? What about discomfort?
Right. And the podcast presents this really compelling perspective that discomfort is actually a good thing.
Like a positive sign.
Exactly. It's a sign that you're pushing yourself and that you're moving towards growth.
Yeah. And they use these really cool analogies in the episode.
Yeah, like the feeling of nervousness before giving a big presentation.
Right. Like most people would just label that as anxiety and
Fear, but they're saying, no, that's actually a signal that you're stretching yourself.
Yeah. It means you're stepping outside of that comfortable space and into a zone where growth is possible.
Right. And they even use this phrase. They say that discomfort is a gym for your character.
Yeah, isn't that great? It's where you build resilience, courage, discipline, those kinds of
Of
things.
inner strength.
Right. And yeah, it's not always going to be easy or pleasant, but it's through those challenges that you really develop those positive qualities.
And it's not just theoretical, right? They implicitly point to all these high achievers that we all know and admire. People like Serena Williams,
Yeah, Elon Musk.
Oprah, The Rock, all these people who have achieved these incredible things. And while the podcast doesn't really go into detail about their specific journeys, it's kind of like a nod to this understanding that success doesn't come easy, right?
Right. It definitely implies that they all face their fair share of discomfort and setbacks and failures. Yeah. But they didn't let those things stop them. And that actually leads to a really powerful line in the episode where they say, pain is temporary, but quitting, regret, that lasts a lifetime.
Wow. Yeah, that's really thought-provoking. So how do we actually start embracing discomfort in our own lives? Like where do we begin?
Yeah. And the podcast gives us 5 specific techniques, which is really helpful. The first one is called micro challenges.
Okay.
So this is all about intentionally incorporating small actions into your daily life that push you just a little bit outside of your comfort zone.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the idea is not to like make these huge drastic changes all at once, but to start small. They give some examples like taking a cold shower.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
Right, it's not exactly pleasant, but it's a way to kind of shock your system a little bit and get used to that feeling of being uncomfortable.
Okay, I see.
And then they also talk about things like speaking up in a meeting when you would normally stay quiet,
Yeah.
or saying no to things that you don't really want to do,
Yeah.
or saying yes to things that scare you a little bit.
Right. So it's like gradually expanding your comfort zone.
Exactly. It's
I-
about stretching those limits little by little. And then the second technique they talk about is reframing pain.
Okay. So how do they suggest we do that?
So instead of automatically labeling that feeling of discomfort as negative, like, oh, this is terrible, I can't handle this, you consciously choose to interpret it through a different lens. So you start telling yourself, this is where I get stronger, or this is an opportunity for growth.
So you're basically changing your internal dialogue.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift,
Yeah.
but it can make a huge difference in how you perceive and respond to challenges.
Yeah. I can see how that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the third technique?
The third technique is called visualizing the end goal. So when you're in the middle of something that feels really uncomfortable and you just want to give up, they suggest that you take a moment to really picture yourself achieving that goal. Like really feel that sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. And that vision of the future reward can be a really powerful motivator to help you push through the present struggle.
Yeah. And the podcast talks about intrinsic reward in this context. What do they mean by that?
Yeah, so intrinsic reward refers to the internal satisfaction that you get from achieving something, as opposed to external rewards like money or recognition.
Okay.
So by visualizing that intrinsic reward, you're tapping into a deeper level of motivation. The fourth technique is seeking accountability.
Okay. Accountability. So this is about getting someone else involved.
Exactly. Because it's easy to make excuses to yourself when you're the only one who knows what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's true.
But if you have someone else who knows your goals and who's going to check in with you and maybe even give you a little tough love if you need it,
It can really make a difference.
it can. It can provide that extra push when you're feeling weak. And then the final technique they talk about is consistent effort. Exactly. They really emphasize the importance of persistence, understanding that progress isn't always linear. There are going to be ups and downs.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like you're not getting anywhere.
But they say those are the times when it's most important to keep going. That's when breakthroughs often happen. And then they talk about this really interesting concept called the positive feedback loop of discomfort.
Okay, what's that?
So the idea is that the more you intentionally step into those uncomfortable situations, the less intimidating they become over time.
So it's like you build up a tolerance.
Yeah, exactly. Like think about the first time you tried to lift weights or give a presentation or ask for a raise. Those things probably felt really scary and overwhelming at first. But with practice, they become more familiar, less anxiety-inducing.
Right.
And the podcast suggests that this process can actually become a positive habit in itself. You start to realize that discomfort isn't this permanent state of suffering, but it's a temporary bridge to improvement.
So it's about changing your relationship with discomfort.
Exactly. And once you start viewing it as a tool for growth rather than a threat, the podcast says you develop greater resilience and confidence.
So what do they say about staying motivated when you face those really tough obstacles?
They really stress that when you feel that strong urge to quit, when you're really struggling, that's often the moment to push through it.
Wow.
Yeah, that internal resistance can actually be a sign that you're on the verge of a breakthrough.
So don't give up.
Exactly. Don't give up. And they suggest that by pushing through those self-imposed limitations, you not only achieve external goals, but you also gain a deeper understanding of your own capabilities.
You discover your true potential.
And you experience a greater sense of freedom. You start to live more authentically. So to sum it all up, the core message of get comfortable being uncomfortable is that discomfort is not something to be feared.
It's a catalyst for growth.
Exactly. And the episode concludes with this really powerful sentiment, reminding you that you were born for this. Like you have everything you need within you to achieve great things.
It's a really empowering message.
It is. It leaves you feeling like anything is possible. So as you go about your day, maybe think about one area in your life where you might be avoiding discomfort, either consciously or unconsciously, and consider what potential for growth might be waiting for you if you were to face that discomfort even in a small way.
Yeah. Maybe identify one of those micro challenges that you could try in the coming days. It could be the first step towards something truly amazing.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So that was Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable from the Inner Fire podcast. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and we'll see you next time.